Who's gone first?
It would be
Justin.
no.
First up is Mr. Hyde.
It's parks and yeah.
And then when you're done, you can give it to this, nobody has the other one?
That's the only one we had Saturday.
Right.
That's the one I had, so
Okay.
I remembered to bring it. Do I get a star?
One is better than none. Okay, this is our committee meetings at Barberton City Council. Today is December 14th, 2020. We're going to start our committee meetings, and first up is City Properties, Parks and Recreation with Mr. Hyde. Are we on? Okay.
Hey, call to order City Properties, Parks and Recreation. It is December 14th, 2020, 6 p.m. at the Active Adult Center. The committee members are present, minus Councilor Coburn, all other members present, and guest note on the sheet. We have no request for legislation, and for miscellaneous discussion, I have a note from the director. The Barberton Parks Commission will hold a special meeting on Tuesday, December 15th at 4:30 p.m. here in the Active Adult Center. And with that, Councilor David, do you have anything?
We're still working on that skate parking, the drawings. We reached out to Wazir City, and they reached out to get some kind of drawing so we can move forward with that. I really think if we start moving out in 2021 and get it situated, this is stepping stone, we get the drawings and present it to the council members and move forward with that. So once I get that information, I'll get it to you, to the chairman, and maybe do magic and start working. Doing what they did.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Angela?
Yes, Mr. Jabber, you were talking about the skate park.
Yes.
Have you checked with planning?
No, man, we have not. Right now, we're just trying to get the drawings.
Well, you're doing some work that's already been done, so what you need to do is check with planning, because at one time, there was plans and whatnot for a skate park.
Okay, we.
And that, there again, I know when it was reviewed and the insurance on it.
Right.
You know, the insurance was very, and it wouldn't go under our umbrella insurance. It was like, if I remember right, it was a separate policy. But we have plans, in the planning department about a skateboard, facility.
Okay,
So
awesome.
we might want to look at that.
There was a committee put together
Yes.
for that park,
Okay.
and there are plans, and that was the reason, was the insurance.
And that's one of the things that Councilman Jaber's been looking at, Wadsworth, what their current premiums are versus whenever that was, if, they've been jacked up through the roof, if they've been lowered, just to have a kind of a current number, just to even look at.
I think it went by square footage and the size of the ramps, and there's a lot involved in it.
Oh, yes.
So we did do a study, and it's available, I'm sure, in the planning
Okay,
department.
thank you, appreciate
Hey,
it. That makes
Mr.
sense.
Griffin?
Time.
Yes, Barbara Noon Kiwanis, that was one of our projects.
Yeah.
We have a bunch of money allocated towards the skate park for that, and we worked on it for a long time, and then, it was pulled off the table for some reason. They just told us, we even had a diagram of a map, but they built up, a project, but it was pulled for some reason, and, we never entertained it again, so, I don't know.
Can I make a
Ms.
comment?
Wagner?
I just wanted to say that, since you're all new to council, that maybe you don't know, we have a million things planned. So maybe it would be good to reach out to either Greg or the mayor when you have an idea and see if they already have something in the works. The problem is, like with everything, we haven't had money, we haven't had personnel. So we have a ton of ideas, we just have not been able to work on them yet. So in that particular case, the skate park, they already did start work on it. So in order to just, make your planning a little bit easier, you should maybe go to the different departments and say, hey, I have an idea. Have you guys ever done anything with this? And then, they might even have information you could work with, and it would make it a lot easier.
I noticed, we did put it on Facebook, and the mayor donor sometimes, he does quote us sometimes what we see on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be nice for him to reach out to us also. So if you could talk to him about that, tell him,
And
this little message.
Well,
And it
he's
does-
doing so many things that I think it's hard to reach out. I mean, like right now, we're working on property maintenance, we're working on year-end budgets, we're working on so many things that you don't really have the time to say, oh, I think I'll reach out.
Right.
It's easier for you if you have an idea to reach out to him, and then he can tell you where things are. And I said even Greg or Trevor in planning. So that's always a good idea, because sometimes you think you have this, I mean, I've done that too, think you have this great idea, and here they've already been working on something similar, for a number of years. So it's just, I just thought I'd
It's
put
good,
that
it's
out
good to
there.
have that, and there's never anything wrong with as much information as possible.
Right.
Never anything wrong with that.
Right.
You understand, Paul?
And it's not who said it. It doesn't make any difference who said it or whose idea it comes up with. You need to just check with those departments, because we are legislation. That's what we do, legislation. Departments do other things. So if you have an idea in the Parks Department or something in planning or something of that sort, you go to that department and sit down and talk to them, because we don't know, they might be looking at something 6 months down the line. And so it's your efforts that well, I kind of wanted to do this, you know what I mean? So it's not who said it first or who did it. It's just getting the job done. So it's always, and this is just for me, you always go to the department, show the respect, and you go to the departments and ask them, have you ever had a study on this? Have you ever done this? And go from there. And I think you'll get a lot of extra information.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, there's as much information as anybody can get. You should always have all of it.
And
All
reaching
of it.
out to the communities is really a good idea. I mean, I've done that a lot of times, and they're usually willing to, give you the information that they have to help you with whatever project you're thinking about doing. And, the parks might be really happy that you're doing that and say, well, then go with it. Or do you think you could talk to this person or that person, or
You
Whatever.
also may run into a community that has something, and the first thing they tell you is, God, no, don't do this. It's the biggest bang you've ever had.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
it's one of those things that, like I said, as much information on a project as you can get anywhere. I'm sure you all know this, and department heads know this,
Mhm.
the better. Anything else from anybody? We have a motion to adjourn, and I will second that. We are adjourned at 6:07.
Okay, next up is public welfare and safety, Mrs. DeBetter.
Go.
I'd like to bring to order the Public Welfare and Safety Committee meeting. It's Monday, December 14th, 6:10 PM here in the Active Adult Center. All members of the committee are present, as well as all other council members with the exception of Mrs. Coburn. And then all others noted. We have a couple of legislation requests this evening. The first one is draft ordinance titled, Enter into Contract, Law Department Defender's Office of Summit County, authorizing the law director to enter into a one-year contract with the Legal Defender's Office of Summit County to provide legal representation to indigent persons in the amount of $170 per case. I did reach out to Mrs. Miller, unfortunately, just right before council here, right when I got home from work today. And, to ask her if that fee was the same as last year. She wasn't positive, but she thinks it's pretty darn close. And it's
I
not.
think it is
I think
the
it is
same.
the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was 170.
I did look it up. It's been 170 for the past 8 years. And the last time it was increased, it was in 2012, and it went from 160 to 170. But it has been 170 since 2012.
We both thought so when I spoke with her, but, we didn't have concrete evidence right then, so. Also, she wanted me to share about this, that, each community pays for their own. So although we're entering into the contract, with Summit County for, the Barberton Municipal Courts, we only pay, the city of Barberton only pays that indigent fee case for residents of Barberton. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Does anyone have any questions about this piece of legislation? Do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make a motion.
Motion made by Mr. Greer. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Griffin. All in favor? Aye. And this passes. The next piece of legislation, the next request is a draft ordinance titled Appropriation Fire Department, appropriating $2,846.43 from the unappropriated item of the general fund to the, and this will be referred to finance. I received a letter from Chief Bursley that this is a reimbursement from the Ohio Department of Public Safety to be used toward COVID-related EMS supplies. And they're asking for this as an emergency wording so that they can complete the transfer before the end of the year. Does anyone have any questions about this piece of legislation? Do I have a motion to call for this?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Griffin. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Greer. All in favor? Aye. Okay, so as far as miscellaneous discussion goes, I've received, last week we did not have safety, but I had received an email from a constituent who, from the constituent's lawyer, speaking on behalf of him regarding liquor license. And so I read the email on the record. I received a second email, and there's nobody really here to respond this evening, but I'm going to just put it on the record, and then I will reach out to the appropriate people to, or maybe forward it to them tomorrow morning. So it reads, Dear Councilwoman DeBevick, please find attached a copy of the request for a hearing signed by Renee Fox. Reportedly, Chief Morber objects to the issuance of this new liquor license. I am curious as to whether there is any email or other items signed by either Carol Fry or the chief requesting that Renee sign and submit the request for the hearing. It appears to me that the hearing request was made prior to any consensus about the matter from City Council. In other instances, I have noted on minutes and from my prior time on City Council that the minutes state that a copy of the application was given to Mrs. Doherty, Chief Morber, and Mrs. Fry, and she did receive an objection. This is from the minutes when Fast Lane applied to transfer their permit to the location now occupied by Building Tomorrow. As I stated in my prior email, that transfer, following a lengthy hearing, was granted by the Department of Liquor Control over the objection of the city. Based upon a text conversation I have been shown by Chris Eisen, it appears to me that Mrs. Fry knew before this past Monday that a request for the hearing was already made and or that there would be a hearing. It was inquired by Mr. Eisen, who objected, and Mrs. Fry stated in response, "It was not announced. You will probably find out at the hearing." I thought perhaps the other members of council should be privy to such requests for a hearing before they're made. However, I don't know, maybe you were privy to it. Please let me know if either of you should have any further questions in this regard or wish to have any further information with respect to the pending application for a new permit by Building Tomorrow LLC, doing business as Barberton Area Sports Bar. I'm going to inquire as to whether Chief Morber had ever objected to the renewal of the license for the Naughty Pine, as it had operated in that location for a number of years. There was another owner there before Mr. I as well. Only since Mr. I has sold the property has there been any objection to my knowledge. I will have to explore that issue further. As far as I can recall from my years on council, I cannot recall there ever having been such an objection to the Naughty Pine license renewal by anyone. So I find this to be peculiar and have to wonder what the motivations are behind the request for hearing executed by the clerk of council. Although I would like to attend Monday evening's safety committee meeting, I do not believe it is permitted at this time. We will watch remotely. I watched last Monday's meeting as it pertains to this matter. I would like to respond to the comment by Mr. Hyden. He said that the licenses I mentioned were different types of licenses. I am quite aware of that fact. My point is the same. These are permits to sell alcohol on premises in the same vicinity, and they were approved without any objections. I would have preferred to defend such an argument by Mr. Hyden in person and immediately be permitted to address it. That is a big problem with this pandemic. I am sure this is frustrating for the members of council in some ways also. In the meantime, anyway, the public must watch while the matter is deliberated outside of our presence. Thank you both for your time and consideration. Sincerely, John Lysenko, LPA. So yes.
If I may, Chair, I had no argument whatsoever to the original letter. It said liquor license. That's a pretty generic term. And I was only clarifying that there are different liquor licenses and one license is not the same as another. There was no argument on my behalf for or against anything. Any opinion I have would not come to light because that is a conflict of interest being the general manager of an establishment that does have a D1, D2, D3, and D6 license. It would be a major conflict, but I did want the council to be aware that when they said a liquor license was granted to whatever businesses, there are different licenses. It's not just one license by the state and that's it. There was no argument by me one way or the other.
No problem.
Thank
So you were just providing clarification as to how the liquor licenses work,
Correct.
is the way I understand it.
Yes.
Yes.
And I will respond to the text message that he is referring to. And Christopher Eisen simply sent me a text and said, who turned, I mean, I'm not quoting it exactly, but he wanted to know who objected to his liquor license. And I stated it was not announced, which it was not. Renee just said we received an objection. And as far as me being privy to whether or not there was going to be a hearing, since he had contacted me, I figured he was going to go to a hearing. I knew nothing about a hearing. All I said was, you will probably find out who objected at your hearing. Because if he was reaching out to me, I was sure that he was going to want to have a hearing about the matter. Therefore, I just mentioned, you will probably find out during your hearing. I knew nothing about it. I did not know who objected. I had no complaints for the 6th Ward, which is where the Naughty Pine is located. So I said, when I received a copy of the liquor license and whether or not I objected, I said I would defer to the others who had been notified, because they would know more about it than I had, and I had received no objections from anybody in that particular area. So that's my explanation for my text. I had no knowledge of a hearing. I was just assuming that Mr. Ison would want to have a hearing.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
We heard Mrs. Fred advise that there's no objections from any residents. Any large, numbers hearing, any residents or visitors in the area?
I have not.
Good enough.
I haven't received any emails or phone calls.
I hope you look at control, we do go against other control, on this, we're probably not happening now. I hope you.
Reynoldsburg.
I hope you go support Mr. Ison and being as council members, that large council members, and get those licenses there. This will be a new business, and I think we really appreciate that.
As I've clearly stated, I will not support or oppose anything with a liquor license, especially one that has a mirror image of the licenses that my business holds. That is a major conflict of interest for me to issue an opinion one way or the other. And especially, this is, the class of license they applied for is a D1, 2, and 3. And those are, I have a 6 on top of that, but I hold 1, 2, 3. I do not hold a 5. So for me to comment one way or the other is an extreme conflict of interest on my part.
You can make it out there. I would really personally support the issue. I think it'd be great for Barberton, to do our business in there. I understand it's a bar, but it's a business. And more traffic coming into Barberton, and more residents going somewhere, spending money in Barberton. And if there's any problem would happen in the future, there's a police report. So we have the police department. If there's any violations, citation. I mean, it's a business. We need this more in the city.
I would like to comment on that. It's different for a council person to receive a complaint, because if I had, I would probably have gone to the safety director and the police chief. So, it's obvious that that's where the problem is. And it is not my place to override whatever the safety director or the chief of police knows about the establishment or has a problem with what's going on in the establishment. So I think that we would be better served if the different departments that are actually actively engaged in those types of matters take care of those types of matters.
Right, it's not just matters. It's a new chapter. It's a new owner. It's not the same owner. It's a new business.
So
We
I
got clean slate.
so I
did
just,
talk.
oh, that's okay, go
I
ahead.
did talk to the residents in that area, the neighbors, and there was no complaints. So I first thought it was my ward. I was mistaken. It's your ward 6. I thought it was Ward 4, touching the back end of it. And I talked to the neighbors, and they're all for it. They want to see it open. They're sick of seeing it shut down. They're sick of people going in for no reason, breaking into an empty building. They want to see it open.
But that being said, you just said it's a brand new business,
It's a new business.
correct? Okay, so they really don't know if they object yet. They might object. There may be some underlying reasons, and I'm not involved in
I was
that.
gonna say, we're all discussing what ifs, and the thing about it is I'm going to, contact, Chief Morber
Right.
and, Beth Doherty tomorrow. I'm gonna forward this to them and see what kind of response I get, so that I know where I stand. I mean, at this point, the only thing I can say unequivocally is that, I have not received any complaints, no phone calls or no emails. But I would like to defer to the police chief, and,
That's what
I also further respect the fact that the same establishment, already went to court, or already went to the hearing, I think, once, correct? Is that what the first
For
email
the-
said?
The original hearing
The
was
original
for
hearing.
the
I'm
transfer
sorry,
of
I
the liquor
was-
license.
Right, and it was overturned, the objection, so I guess if it's the same argument, then, I might look otherwise, but if there's another objection or reason, then, we have to honor what our police chief and
Exactly.
so, I mean, I can't, I guess what I'm saying is I can't answer the what ifs right now because I haven't deferred to the police chief if that's who had the objection or the safety director. All I
And I
know
don't
now
know.
is that you didn't have the objection.
Right,
so-
I do not know who had the objection, but I am not going to put my 2 cents in when I don't know anything about it.
Yes, so that's what I need to find out, and I will find out and I will answer Mr. Lysenko, and let him know, what I know, at least I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to know what the objection, I don't know how it works, so,
If you might, CC, you know.
Yes, I will.
I just have a question, how long has that been shut down? It hasn't been a bar in how long?
It lapsed, so because of COVID, I think in the first email, Mr. Lysenko said that because of COVID, it lapsed. Because the license was approved, was it approved the first? It was approved, and
It was approved, but to my knowledge, the approval on the transfer was not renewed. So
Has it
the
been
license,
down since?
if I'm not mistaken, the license that transferred was never, the renewal fee was not paid, which means it became ineffective.
Was it closed before the COVID? I'm just trying to get my head, is it?
I'm
was it
looking
closed
back
this
at
year
your
or
last
last
email, because I don't have a time frame here.
I may be mistaken, but I believe that the letter came in January that there was no longer a license
So.
there in January because the renewal fee had not been paid. I may be mistaken, but I believe that was the case there.
I'm sorry, I'm just glancing over the last email because it's been a week since I read it, so. Yeah, it doesn't give that timeline that you're discussing, all it says
I
is.
may be mistaken.
No, I know, I'm just saying, the dates that I have here are that the application for this new license was submitted on behalf of the applicant in July 2020. Due to the pandemic, this business has been delayed from proceeding in having its application considered as it would normally and on a much longer time frame. The objection you are now considering will extend that process much further. Although the objection will extend the time frame considerably, I am sure that there will be I am not sure there will be any new grounds for the objection that the Department of Liquor Control has not already heard and issued a transfer in spite of such objections. And then I have attached here two portions of the hearing transcript where the city council's objection was heard in July of 2019. Should you wish to have a copy of the entire transcript, please let me know, I will send it along. So I haven't opened that transcript, but I guess I haven't done my due diligence because I need to contact, to find out who made the objection and what the objection is, if I'm allowed to indeed know, and then contact Mr. Lysenko.
I was just going to comment that in all the time I've been on council, I could have forgotten about a time, but I have never known of council being involved in whether or not a liquor license is issued. That is usually, as I said, when they apply and they're asking if there are any objections, the council person whose ward the establishment is in does get a letter asking them if they have objections. But as far as having a vote at council saying that we collectively are turning down the liquor license, that doesn't happen. That happens at the Board of Liquor Control. Am I right, Craig?
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, we have never even had discussion. This is the most discussion we have ever had about a liquor license.
We might not have a vote, but we have a voice now. I mean, so it's good to speak up and support
We always had a voice. It's
I know,
just
but
that
now-
we are not the Ohio liquor
I know,
license.
we still go
You know,
out there
we
and
don't
meet.
live in state.
You have to know what your place is. We are a council person. We do not have,
We need to help them out.
we do not have the,
We don't have, we have a voice, so we can present ourselves in front of the people.
Mr. Beck?
Say hello.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I was reading to see if it said, because in the email, it alluded to the fact that, at the hearing, city council objected. And so I was scanning the, transcript. So I
Okay.
apologize. I was
that's
just
okay.
trying to scan it, yes.
I can say this, if a hearing from the Department of Commerce Division of Liquor Control does grant in a transfer in July, the fees, aside from this year when things were moved because of COVID, licensing and fees are due in their hands by October 1st. If they do not have them by a certain date, then whatever license held, transferred or owned, will fall out of force, and the property will no longer have that. They would have to go through the reapplication process, which is what is going on here.
Has there been an extension as a result of COVID? I'm just curious. Were offices closed? Are they
The
working
the
on?
extension of October 1st
Okay.
has run to the end of the year for renewals.
Okay. Yes,
One more,
no problem.
one more comment. In regard to us having a voice, this is what I have to say to that. Since nobody in this room knows what the objection is, I'm not using my voice to override something I don't even know what it's about. So how can I go and fight for someone if I don't even know what the issue
It's your
is?
ward, you should know what the issue is. This is
Well,
your
with all due
ward.
How can I know it? It's the Board of Liquor
Ask-
Control.
Ask him, email the chief.
With all due respect, it's
Ask
my
him why the hell
responsibility.
he said object to this.
I don't do
That's
that.
your job, you're the council.
No, it
For that- for
isn't.
that
It isn't
board.
my job
So
to
I-
do that.
Honestly,
Definitely
this is my job because I received the emails and, I guess I shouldn't have assumed that we would have someone here to possibly answer questions. We don't, as a direct result of COVID. So, I will definitely reach out, get the answers, and then we will have something more better to discuss it on. After I get the proper answers. And so I apologize for not coming prepared with those, questions.
Well, you
being
really
answered.
can't, Carla, because you don't know what it's
Well, no.
about either.
Well, no, that's what but I should have contacted or forwarded this to the court. My responsibility, let me rephrase, my responsibility was to forward this to the chief and Mrs. Doherty. That was my responsibility. So I will do that tomorrow morning, and, I'm sure that I will receive, a swift response, and then I will be better prepared to answer the questions that I need to answer, as far as that goes. I was just kind of finishing scanning, but I'll have an opportunity, I'll go home tonight and read this, and, but I do think that we need the objection. It's fair for, if they're asking us what the objection is, I think it's fair to share what the objection is. If we have an objection, we have an objection. When I say we, I'm not saying we here, because none of us actually objected.
Right, because we don't know what they're
Right.
objecting.
Correct. So we don't know what the objection is. I'm not aware if Mr. Lysenko knows what the objection is or not. He didn't mention what it was.
I don't think they know either, and I think that is something that is left for the Liquor Control Board. And Bebe, you're more versed than us, you would know,
I was just gonna defer to.
I have myself never
had to do
had
it.
to attend a liquor hearing.
Okay,
I don't know the process. I don't know when objections are made public. I don't know when they are made private. That whole process eludes me, so I can't comment there.
I honestly think it's kind of a private process. And actually, there have been liquor licenses turned down in the past, but we never hear why. It's not something that is common knowledge for us.
Well, it should be a public, with all due respect, it should be a public record. It should be a public record after the hearing. You should know.
Right.
You should be able to find out why the objection occurred.
Mr. Once, I do know that once the hearing is complete, those are public records.
I would guess that it would have to be. Yes,
Mr. Bevick, I've been in 2 hearings, okay? Once as a council person and once as a neighbor living in that area. And I was asked by my attorney, Mr. Sugarman, the chief, did I object? And this time I did. And I put this little letter to the Liquor Control Board. Okay, they subpoenaed me or whatever, they told me I had to go to this hearing. So at this hearing, via remote control, whatever, they called me on the stand, it's like a regular court, and I told them why I objected. Okay, and the attorneys are there for both sides, it's just like a courtroom. And then afterwards, we don't know whether they got it or not, you can kind of feel, whether they got it or not, then it's over. Then the other side will have 3 or 4 people, whoever they want. Just like the last time, they had like 3 other people. They were for the business. They were there, and myself, the chief, and
Safety director.
yeah, maybe, I don't think just me and the chief were there the second time. But remember, before Mr. Wagner passed away, he was there, Elwood was there, because he was the 3rd ward council, and I was there just as a neighborhood, a person in the neighborhood. And so that's the way it goes. Council itself has nothing to do with whether they get granted the license or nothing. I suppose if you try hard enough, you could go be at the hearing, but they have to want you to be there too, you know what I'm saying? And then they decide, they can override, the chief. They could override, overrode me as being a citizen, so that's not enough or whatever, but they didn't. So really, this conversation we're having doesn't really mean. Yeah.
right. Which is what I started. I guess I just wanted to provide, because they cannot be here to speak on behalf of it, and they have the right as citizens to be here, that I needed to at least share the email on the record as they wished, and like I said, I will follow up tomorrow with the chief and Mrs. Doherty, and I will answer Mr. Lysenko, and if I have anything else, I'll attach at least you and Mr. Jabber and Mr. Hyde, because made it very clear that it's a conflict of interest, and I completely understand it would be probably, I'm sure that Mrs. Miller would agree that he would need to abstain from any involvement, but and then we can go from there and find out what we are indeed allowed to know, because I don't know what we are allowed to know.
Exactly.
And and I guess if I didn't know, so I would like to say this, if I don't know what the objections are, then I would feel comfortable saying I personally have not received any complaints about it at all. But that's what I have to offer. I haven't received any complaints. So that's where I stand right now. I personally have not received any complaints from any constituents. So with that, does anybody else have any questions or concerns? So tomorrow morning, I will, just for clarification, I will forward this to the chief and Mrs. Doherty. I will forward both emails. I will wait for their follow-up, and I will copy Mrs. Fry and Mr. Jabber. Would anybody else like to be copied? Okay, I'll just copy everyone. How about that?
Yeah.
I'll copy everyone, and that way we can all be kept abreast of the situation. Does that sound fair? Okay. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn? Does anyone else have anything else to say? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Griffin,
And I'll second.
second by Mr. Greer. We are adjourned at 6:40.
Next up is Rules, Marketing and Development, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like the Rules Marketing and Development, I'd like to call this meeting to order today, December 14th. We are meeting in the Active Adult Center. All members are present on my committee, and we have one council person that's missing. Tonight, we do not have any requests for legislation. We are open to discussion. Anybody want to discuss anything for rules? Okay, hearing none. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jaber. We are adjourned at 6:41.
Next up is a special street sidewalk and lighting with Mr. Griffin.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to call to order street, sidewalk, and lighting. This is a special. Today is December 14th. It is 6:41 at the Active Adult Center. All members of the committee are present. All members of council, minus Mrs. Colburn, are present, and guests noted on my sheet. Today we have two requests for legislation. First request is a draft ordinance titled Authorized Payment, City of Akron. An ordinance authorizing the payment for the amount of $15,179.03 to the City of Akron for the final project construction costs performed within the City of Barberton limits on West State Street and declaring an emergency. Mr. Tracy sent an email explaining this to the committee. I did forward it to the rest of council. It was pretty late, but the reason for the cost going over the original estimate was that the numbers we got were for asphalt. And the project was done in concrete, which was part of the original contract that we signed with them. We knew it couldn't do that, and that's what they did. So this is authorizing the City of Barberton to pay that additional amount that over the initial estimates that we first received. We are only required to pay 20% of, this is 20%, our 20% for the cost. Mr. Tracy, is there anything that we really need to add to this?
You did a fine job.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions?
Because there was two emails that went out, and I asked them before council, and that's what it was. It was, it was just to pay the overage on the original estimate. And then the reason being was because it was done in concrete, which we had there on our portion of State Street anyways. And so that is what this is, and it's just the 20%. So, Mrs. Vedder?
Since this would be an extra, or a change order and it wasn't budgeted, where does this come from? Does it come from the infrastructure reserve fund? Can it issue eight?
This is on permissive license tax.
Does it come from the
Yeah.
license tax? Okay. Thank you.
Is there any questions from committee about this? Any questions from council? I would say gathered, but it's kind of empty today. Do I have a motion to call for this piece of legislation?
I'll make a motion.
Motion made by Mrs. Fry,
I will second.
then seconded by Mrs. Angeloff. All in favor?
Aye. Aye, I'm sorry. These are the wrong
The wrong letter down.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I was
yeah,
just.
that's what, I was hung up on that.
All right, so, one. Second piece of requested legislation is a draft ordinance titled Enter into Contract GPD Group. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with GPD Group for the general professional engineering services, including but not limited to permissive and residential street resurfacing programs, infrastructure improvement, design management, street crack sealing, street stripping, or striping, and miscellaneous engineering management services. In an email from Mr. Tracy, which I believe this was the committee and I forwarded it to everybody, so it should be in your email, was his explanation, and then I replied asking for the contract. So everybody does have the original contract. This is continuing the contract with GPD for general engineering services listed in the contract as well as the ordinance title. The things here to note is that GPD, we use GPD for applying for grants. They handle, they're pre-qualified on, with ODOT for a number of engineering fields. There will be no hourly rate increase for this year. And so they're going to be staying the same. I believe that the contract, in the back of the contract, there's the rates for the different services, hourly rates for the different services that they provide. Another thing to note here, Mr. Tracy pointed out that GPD is responsible for acquiring $20 million for an estimated $25 million in infrastructure improvements for the city of Barberton. Of that $25 million in projects, the city matched approximately $4.6 million. So it's a pretty good bargain that we get from them. Do I have any questions from the committee about this piece of legislation? Is there any questions from council? Mrs. Bevitt?
Thank you, Chair. I understand that there is it's based on hourly rate. Is there a minimum amount that we have to spend? And do you know what I think what was budgeted for 2020?
Yeah, so there's no minimum rate. I mean, they're still working on all the other AMATS projects, doing design engineering for that. So like this year, I made a PO in anticipation of the road program, and I didn't spend anything on it. So that'll all go back into the budget after we close that out. And they don't charge us for phone calls and getting advice and for support services, things like that. But there's no minimum rate at all that I've never been involved with.
Okay. I didn't have an opportunity to look at the budget, but I for some reason I feel like there's a line item in there for $68,000, somewhere around $68,000 for overseeing the street program.
So this year, I think we had 30 or 40 budgeted.
Okay.
It's right around 50 normally we've done. I've seen in VIP a year where it was 68. It was a previous year before me, but
Okay.
typically the road program is anywhere between 40, 50,000. It all depends on the size of the program, really.
So we would not have expended that amount this year then?
We didn't spend anything this
Okay.
year as far as the road program. It was encumbered, but it'll be unencumbered when we close the PO at the end of the year, go back into the street capital fund.
Okay.
But that's for, I want to get this done soon because, I think I wrote in the email that I put in there that we want to try to get our bid out as soon as possible. Norton is actually going to bid here at the end of the month. The earlier you bid in the season, a lot of times you get better pricing. So I wanted to try to get this done, get your guys' input, the other email I sent out, and try to have everything ready to go. So as soon as our budget passes, we can go out for bid. And start, instead of waiting until middle of April, and a lot of contractors already have their schedules seasoned up out for the season. So we want to try to get in early and get on their schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy.
Are there any other questions from council? I actually have, one. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna make a comment, so you go ahead with your
Okay.
question, I'm gonna make a comment.
Mr. Tracy, could you provide council with a list of services that a city hired engineer would perform that go hand in hand with what GPD is providing? It doesn't have to be right now, but would you be able to?
Yeah, why don't I email you something, because honestly.
Yeah, just like what, if we hired a city engineer, what would their job title entail that overlaps what GPD is providing now?
I would say probably be minimal, but
Very minimal.
I'll investigate that. A lot of the costs involved with the road program are inspection. So GPD provided some inspector to make sure it's all done by specifications. And then you have just a lot of the administrative costs, which, I mean, maybe the GIS part of it, which we kind of took over just through attrition, where Caroline and myself and you guys remember we passed the IMGIS stuff in the past. We can do a lot of that stuff on there now. So there's things that have already kind of fallen off their responsibilities. But I can look into for you guys. But I think the savings for this application would be fairly minimal.
And I know where we renew this, do we look at other firms?
So we've been with them since 2010. We've worked with 5 other firms in the last 5 years or so. I did pull up, let me back up. Norton just renewed with GPD for 3 years as well, next door. We did not go out for qualifications. Obviously, they're qualified, they're working for us for 10 years. And their fee schedule, it's going to stay the same for 5 years with this contract. That doesn't happen a whole lot. But I did pull up the city of Reynoldsburg just did a 4-year contract with OHM Advisors. And if you look at their rate list, 28 of the 37 positions on the rate list are over $100. So that's 75% of their list. Whereas you have 25% of GPD's list is over $100. So they're very competitive. They're competitive and comparable to all the other firms that we use. So we know through our experience with other firms that they're competitive with all the other firms.
Awesome, thank you. Sammy, Mrs. Fry?
I just wanted to make a comment that, as Mr. Tracy has just alluded to, we have to get in any streets that we feel are in really bad shape, because the sooner we get them in, the sooner they get a list. And if anybody drives around in Norton and got to see how much they got done last year, it was astronomical. I mean, they did whole neighborhoods. So going out to bid early is really in our favor. And so if everybody could get those in, that would be great.
Yeah, well, that's gonna lead me into miscellaneous. Are there any other discussions on this piece of ordinance? Do I have a motion to call for this piece of ordinance?
I'll make the motion to call, and I'll second it.
Motion made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. Fry. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, miscellaneous discussion. As Mrs. Fry just pointed out, Mr. Tracy reached out to us about providing recommendations for roads for the 2021 season. So if we have any recommendations or residents have any recommendations, we should comprise those and then send them over as soon as possible to Mr. Tracy. Now, he did say December 31st, but I would imagine the sooner we have them, the more we know we can get the other contract out for bid faster. In that same email that Mr. Tracy provided, he did want to say that although that the road program was postponed for 2020, they did repave 3 lane miles of road using federal dollars, federal grant dollars with our local match. So I want to point out next year is going to be a really active year. As of our last committee, which was, I believe, a week ago, we're going to have a bigger road project. How big, we don't know, but hopefully it's double of what a normal road project would look like. The roads that are looking like they're coming up. It should be on the thing is Worcester Road North, repaving from Norton Avenue to Burt. Norton Avenue, repaving from Worcester Road North to 4th Street. 2nd Street Southwest, repaving from Road, it says Diet.
Road diet, yep.
Okay,
That's a.
with Road Diet. Okay, from Worcester Road West to Hudson Run Road. 5th Street Northeast, repaving from the concrete near Wright Place to the concrete just south of East Lake. And hopefully, if the freeway project progresses like it should, we may see Worcester Road North repaved. So the big thing to take from this is getting road recommendations out to Mr. Tracy as fast as possible. Is there any questions about Mr. Tracy?
Just want to apologize, I put 2020 road program on the subject for your email, and I meant 2021.
2021.
Yeah, we don't want 2020.
No, that wasn't any fun, so.
In all fairness, yeah.
Are there any questions about the road, Mr. Heidi?
Thank you. Mr. Tracy, I know that the administration looks at it every year, but could 2021 be where we can beat AMATs and the Fed as hard as we can to reconstruct Van Buren from Snyder to the city limits? I know it's an issue every year, but I don't know if we can put a little extra focus this year on it needs a whole reconstruction with curbs and everything. And I know that's a tall task and then neighbors have to sign off on things and whatnot, but I would love to see that trying to take the forefront there.
We are currently trying to figure out a way to fit that in our budget along with the road, the residential road program and all the obligations of Amex. We're looking at possibly things with the Muskingum watershed, and that is not eligible for AMAX funding because it's got to be on a certain list and it's not permissive. So, you know what? Don't quote me on that. I know we checked with AMAX, it's not eligible for AMAX funding, so we have to find another way to fund that. So to try to find, some other way to get 20% funding, we only have to pay 20% would be our goal. It's going to be it would be a big undertaking to do that. But it's like you've been in my office or something, Tom. We've been talking about that here the past about 3-4 months.
It's, like I said, I know it's not just a simple paving on that road. It needs a total redo. So thank you.
Would that road be eligible for chip and seal, or is that, I don't know?
Well, I think given the condition,
It travels pretty highly.
I think given the condition and the road use, you're probably going to want to look at least a no. We're still investigating what the best, it's in a floodplain as well, so you have to be careful about how much you put into the infrastructure there, but I think there's areas that would deserve curb and gutter and some storm sewers and whatnot, and there's areas that just need a good 3-inch mill and fill and repaving out to the city limits. I was contacted late middle of this year and we're going into next year that Summit County engineer and New Franklin want to pave Eastern Road from 619 to South Van Buren. That's a permissive street, so our portion of that would only be about 25% of that road because we only own half the road, one side of the road, halfway down. So that would be another useful job that we're looking into right now as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Is there any other questions from council or committee? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made by Mrs. Angela
And I will second it.
and seconded by Mrs. Fry. We are adjourned at 6:58 p.m.
Okay, next up is a special planning, annexation, and codes meeting, Mrs. Angela.
I broke it.
Technical difficulties here. It's not recording.
Yeah, I gave it to you too.
Well, it probably, the battery probably wouldn't get charged either, so.
I blame it on Justin.
I couldn't get it to you.
Are we being recorded though?
We are being
Yeah,
recorded.
okay,
You
so
can't even turn it off.
it won't even go off. I wanted to turn the power off and turn it back on, but it won't. Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. This is a special planning annexation and code meeting, December 14th at 7 p.m. All members are present except for Mrs. Coburn, who is absent. Other council members are present, and along with guests as listed on my sheet. We currently have no request for legislation, but we do have current legislation. A resolution number 147, 2020, titled Amending Barberton Codified Ordinances, Chapter 670, Chapter 1422, Chapter 1444. We had the first reading on November 30th. Second reading will be today. And then next week will be the third reading. And that is the trees and the weeds and the grass and registration in general and permits and fees. Do you have any questions? No. All right. Thank you. The second is a resolution number 148, 2020, titled Amending Barberton Codified Ordinances, Chapter 1478, Rental Registration. We are going to have to amend that resolution 148, 2020, to add the wording, the change of the wording in section H. And I think I've emailed everybody section H. This was brought to the attention from Mr. Greer and Mr. Heide, and it was rewritten, so it's pretty elementary as precise. And I will read that. Since we're not taping, well, I'm going to read that. Section 8 will read, rental properties currently at the reduced $20 registration rate will remain at this rate unless there is a violation or change of ownership. If there is a violation or change in ownership, the rental property registration will be increased and remain at the $100 per unit per year rate. Rental properties registered with the city of Barberton that are in good standing, meaning they have not had any violations during the previous 3 years, January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2020, where the year 2021 would represent the property's first year at the reduced $20 rate. These properties will be grandfathered at the $20 reduced rate. If there is a violation or a change in ownership, the rental property registration will be increased and remain at the $100 per unit per year. Any rental properties that register with the city for the 2021 registration year prior to the passage and effective date of ordinance 148, 2020, effective date January 20th, 2021, will be grandfathered at the $40 per unit rate for the 2021 registration year only. Starting the registration year, 2022, these units will be billed at the $100 per unit per year registration rate. That will be the new section H. Then, it was comment on council floor, it would be nice that we could review this. So the section M, which will be added, will read, this ordinance shall be reviewed by city council in November 2022. I had will in there, but we don't want to put will, we want to say shall be reviewed. And do I have any comments with section, the new revised section H or section M? Mr. Heide?
No, thank you, Chairman. I just want to thank you for going the extra time to put that in there. I think that means a lot to this ordinance and the new fee schedule. And I think having things like this in black and white is a real blessing. So I appreciate your effort on that.
Thank you, Mr. Greer.
I too would like to thank you for putting this together. I read it and then I read ours and I was like, yeah,
It makes
it's a little clearer now.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
You're
And
welcome.
like you said, black and white is good to go. And at the beginning of this, I was really pushing for a pro rate, which would make the first year $60. So and that came from recommendations from a landlord that I was talking to. And actually, this new language is $20 cheaper than that. So I'm happy with it. I'm extremely happy with it for what it is.
And we won't see the returns until next year when they're charged $100. But when you have an ordinance that will be passed in January 20th, but in the ordinance it says you have till March 31st to pay, then you have that little bit of time in there. So it's not fair for the landlord. So this is the best way to put it. And we will, when we review it in 2022, that will be the start of the $100, and then we can go from there. So I think it's very fair. I haven't talked to any renters or any landlords, so I guess that's good. So do I have a motion to amend? Did you
So
have-
I just wanted to mention something else, and it's not so much about, it's about this in general, the ordinance. One of the big things I'm hearing back from the landlords I do talk to is, what are they gonna get from this? The first round is, that this came out, one of the landlords mentions that there was a magistrate that would be made available to them for legal help. And to date, and this is more for the mayor's plan afterwards, I understand that. I just wanted to not let that go by the wayside, was a big piece of feedback that I was getting is, they said it like, what am I getting from this? But there was the slides that was presented with the magistrate services as well as the inspections. And they just wanted to get clarification on, I think that a lot of it boiled down to, it just wasn't clear to them really what's going on. The one thing that stood out to them obviously is more money. But as far as what extras are going to be provided for both them and the tenant, wasn't clear. And so I just wanted to point that out too. That was some big feedback that I got.
Well, there probably won't be any for this coming year, but the following year, and that's something that we've always looked at. My biggest complaint is when, excuse me, sorry, I'll answer. My biggest complaint is when I was in the prosecutor's office and there was a building violation and the landlord would come in a week before, this is an example, and go up to the desk and they would pull the ticket and he'd say, I just go ahead and pay that now, and he paid court costs. So the building department never got the fee of sending the certified letters out and everything of that sort. Or else you go to court and the judge slaps you with a $10 fine. So, and a lot of times the building department wouldn't, for some reason in between, they wouldn't get any type of notification. So there's a big gap there, and I think that we're on the right road now with reviewing that in a couple years. And just, keep in mind, this ordinance, like I told Mr. Heide, this is registration fee, that's what that is, just the fee registration. Everything else, we can look at something different on another legislation, add to a legislation, make some changes on it. That's what we're here for. We're here for legislation. We don't want to gouge any of the landlords or any of the residents, but we want them to be safe too. So, yes, Mr. Hyde.
Thank you, Chair. I was just gonna add to that for Mr. Greer. Friday, I met with the mayor and the chairwoman. I've been back and forth on emails. I did get ahead of myself with certain issues, and the chairwoman sometimes has to kick me a little, keep me focused, which is good.
Take you up.
But it's, this particular ordinance is strictly .08, which is the fees. And the chairwoman has said she's willing to work some more next year to start looking at the other sections of it. So in my head, the answer of what is a landlord going to get with this ordinance, zero. Because deals with fees only. Now, when next year comes, January, February, it would be great to sit down and look at the entire section of the rental registration to see if there could be things added. I had a couple notes that Chairwoman and I have gone back and forth with, but I suppose, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you say, what are we going to get with this ordinance? With this ordinance,
An increase in
an increase in fees, and that's it. We can't put anything else in this ordinance. We
Correct.
can't say, but that is, the chairwoman I've said, agreed that, it does have merit to look into some things once this is passed. If this isn't passed, then there's no money for any extras, anything like that,
Correct.
so.
Correct. I think it was just more of, is this an arbitrary fee raise? Or, just in general, it don't have to be in here, but why is the question, which they should be asking, why is the increase in, I think that's what they told me, but.
Because it hasn't been increased since 2009.
Right, why? Why is it being increased? What's going to change, if anything? It's just it was a general question.
Yeah, we want to be able to get a handle on the landlords and the renters, in this town, and this is just a start, so. Mrs. Fry?
I was just going to say what they get out of it is the opportunity to do business in Barberton. Because if you're going to do any building at your home, you have to buy a permit. What do you get out of that? You get somebody that, you paid your fee and they probably come and do an inspection or whatever after it's done. But that's why a lot of people don't get them. And that's why we have a lot of landlords too that probably aren't even registered. But, we have everything for the city. Let's do this, let's do that. But it all comes back to having the money to do it, having the manpower to enforce it. And if we don't start upping our fees and our permit, fees for permits and keeping things, under wraps, we're never going to get anywhere. And basically, that's, what they're getting, nothing.
And-
But they haven't had an increase.
Right.
This is Stanislaw said for 11
You got a
years.
little bonus right there, because hopefully that in 2022 that we can review this and get the funding, see what Jeremy can give us on, how many renters come in and what we have and all that. That kind of puts us on ground with both feet. Then we could look into other things, and I think that's what that will be the main goal, because I don't know about anybody else, but it's, the calls that I receive are from neighbors about, people moving out, rentals and everything of that sort. That is a problem, and it's really not a problem, but if you live in a different city, Cleveland, and you don't come down to Barberton to look at your rental very often, you're not familiar with that. You're not familiar with that stuff. And the building department, God bless them, they do the best they can with what they have. And I think that, if ever we can, advance that by, adding a couple more people and doing the zoning that the mayor had talked about, I think that's the way to go. So, I'm just going to, put it out there that this is going to be a big project for our next term, that we can, get a hold of this and help the administration and see what we can do with that. Mr. Hyde?
Thank you. My final point is, without this legislation, without this increase, the whole talk of what can we get for it, what programs are going to be due, it's all moot. Because if we don't pass this, then the answer is absolutely nothing. If we pass this and can start to build a pot, then we could take better input from landlords to say, what kind of things, what are you lacking? What kind of resources and tools are you lacking? But without this, that conversation doesn't happen.
I think that section of the conversation was missing though in this original piece.
That's the point that I wanted to make. Chair.
That's all, I think what the
Yeah.
answers were right here was just what they needed. It was exactly what they needed. We're gonna look at it in the next,
We can make it better. We
Right.
can improve it, make it better. That's what we do. Yes.
Just one more comment.
Oh, okay.
Some of the landlords that are better landlords would make good magistrates because they take care of their property. And therefore they would like the other people that do business here to also take care of theirs. And, you know, maybe we can do something along that line. That's been talked about before, but I think it would be a really good idea because you want somebody in that capacity that actually understands, you know, what's going on.
Awesome, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I think what Justin is talking about is similar complaints over the last couple of years that I've received. And I've received a few calls now, but not as many as I have in the past. And I think when Justin says, what am I gonna get from this? And Mr. Heidick says, nothing, at least Mr. Heidick's being honest. So when it was first created, the same conversation was had, and yet nothing, no discussion ever followed about what we were going to do with it. And so I think that that's probably where the question from the landlords is stemming from. And honestly, I've been contacted by probably some of our better landlords because they do want to see their property value increase. They have an investment in our community and they're not opposed to paying an additional fee, but they want a program that's going to work efficiently for particularly rental, which is a large portion of our housing stock here in the city, unfortunately.
Yeah,
So,
unfortunately. it's true.
I think when you're saying that they want to know what they're going to get, I think it's because we passed legislation for a rental registration fee, but what was done with the money was never very clear or was never put into writing exactly what, you know, they were looking for. And so I think that that's probably where the concern stems, that we're gonna raise fees and then never, you know, follow through. So I think that, you know, we need to, as the city council, be committed to following through to make this a strong program that will really aid in the beautification of the city, safety for our residents, and, you know, make these rentals a place where citizens want to come in.
I want to make one more comment, Nina.
Go ahead.
Yes. I just wanted to say that I brought up that letter from Chuck Papa. And he said, oh, our money just goes in the general fund, which is not true. We have a specific fund where the rental registration goes. So actually, when we increase the fees, we're gonna know more, well, not that we don't know what we have, but we've never raised enough to actually hire someone. Maybe with these increased fees, we will be able to. And it is earmarked for the rental registration. And we're not just spending it on things that have nothing to do with property maintenance. I just wanted to make that point. And I'm sorry, Craig, I know you wanted to get out of here. This has been the biggest committee of the whole.
Mr. Hyde.
To Councilor Frye's point there, the budget this year had estimated revenue for the rental registration of $60,000. There's not a whole lot of programs to do with $60,000, so that's all I can say with that.
Okay. Well, I just want to tell everybody, I do appreciate the open dialogue. I really think that's what we need to do is to get out our feelings and people talk to different people, and I think this is what we need to put together and then all agree on. It's a lot of work. This rental registration is going to be a lot of work, but I look forward to it, and anything new that comes up, we'll discuss it in the committee. So right now, do I have a motion to amend section H and the addition of section M as read and presented?
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Greer, first motion. Mr. Mendes, second. All in favor? Aye. Motion passed. Thank you. Okay, I have an appointment to the Design Review Board, Willie Jenkins. It's a 3-year term, beginning January 1st, 2021, and ending December 31st, 2023. And I've had the pleasure to sit on the Design Review Board as council representative, and I just get the biggest kick out of Mr. Jenkins. He comes to every meeting that he possibly can. He has his questions. He really enjoys, the design of downtown and what's expected. And he served 3 years, and he's eager to serve another 3 years, and I'm eager to, serve with him. So do I have a motion? Has everybody got a chance to read his resume and that? Okay. Do I have a motion to appoint, Mr. Willie Jenkins to the Design Review Board?
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Greer? Mr. Hedges? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and no miscellaneous discussion. We'll go on. Thank you.
You need a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just ready to go, huh? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to it.
Mr. Greer,
I'll second.
second, Mr. Hedges, and we are adjourned at 7:20.
Mrs. Fry, this is much more important than the Browns.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll do it fast. I'm not gonna talk about my stuff.
Next up is city utilities. Mrs. Coburn is not here, so Mrs. Fry will be handling this meeting.
Okay, I'm ready. You weren't able to get batteries in that, huh?
I do have batteries.
Okay, do you think we should wait, or?
The only thing I'm afraid of is shutting that off. Can you shut that off?
It won't stop, it won't shut off. I tried to take the power on the side. The red light stays on, but it doesn't move. He broke it.
We all got phones.
I was gonna say, everyone just record their own meeting and then just text it.
My phone's in the police.
Like that?
So my phone down.
Because we all did that.
Or if you're gonna use it.
It's not recording at all. No?
I don't know. I don't know if it was recorded and waiting.
I'm trying to put on my gloves here pretty soon.
Well, you know what? Usually I'm not.
So, it's really cold.
You got it?
All right. You know, I worry about that. Okay. All right. Give it on streets. Oh, okay, yes, streets utilities. I'm sorry. Do I hit this one? No. No, okay. There, I got it now. I hit the right one. Yeah, I know. All right. Thank you, Mr. President. As you mentioned, Mrs. Coburn is not here tonight. Therefore, since I'm second on the committee, I'm going to start the committee meeting for the city utilities. Tonight it is December 14th, Monday evening. We're in the Active Adult Center. All other members other than Mrs. Coburn are present for the committee, as well as all of council and guests as noted on my sheet. We have 2 pieces of current legislation on the agenda. The first is ordinance number 154, 2020. This is for electricity aggregation program. This was given to us by Mr. Tracy, and he has gotten the best rate that the city has ever been given. And I think it's like
4.97 cents per kilowatt.
There you go, 0.4977. That's the lowest that we've ever gotten. So, that's what that ordinance is for, and it goes to 2024, Mr. Tracy?
It's a 4 years, yes, 4 years.
Okay, all right. So that's the first piece of legislation on the agenda for tonight. Any questions about that? No? All right, the second piece of legislation for utilities for this evening is to enter into contract with Ream and Hager Environmental. This particular piece of legislation is for the wastewater treatment plant analytical services contract. And we had bids from, I believe, 3 different laboratories, and they came in with the best prices as far as the majority of the perimeters that were listed. Therefore, they were chosen. Do I have any questions about this, Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank Mr. Weaver for including all the bids and everything in our package there. I appreciate that.
He always does that.
I wanted to point it out though.
Yes, he's
I
good.
like that.
Okay, any other questions about this particular piece of legislation? Hearing none, we'll go on. We're gonna vote on those tonight. There were no new requests for legislation. And does anybody have any miscellaneous discussion for utilities? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, motion made by Mrs. DeBevick, and I'll have to second it. Seconded by Carol Fry, and we are adjourned at 7:28 p.m. Okay.
Okay, next up is finance and personnel. Mrs. Fry, back on the house.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight is Monday, December 14th. We're in the Active Adult Center. All members of the Finance and Personnel Committee are present. We are beginning the meeting at 7:28. All other council members are present with the exception of Mrs. Coburn. And all other guests as noted on my meeting sheet. Topics for discussion are the current legislation that we have on the agenda for this evening, which is ordinance number 158-2020. And this is to adopt the RETA rules and regulations. Mr. Flaker had sent those to us via email, but it's like 178 pages, I believe, or 67. But at any rate, if you have any questions, you can refer to that. Does anybody have any other questions for this piece of legislation? Okay, we'll be voting on that this evening. The second piece of legislation is a new request, and it is a draft ordinance titled Year-End Appropriations Amendments. This is modifying appropriations within certain departments and funds in order to cover expenditures to end the fiscal year. We have all gotten the letter that the piece of legislation, it is mapped out in that what funds are going to have what amounts and so on. Any questions about this piece of legislation? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to call for this? Motion made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. DeBevick. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, it is approved. The second piece, request for legislation is a draft ordinance titled 2021 Temporary Budget. And this is to adopt a temporary budget for various funds of the city of Barberton for the period beginning January 1st, 2021, and providing for the administration. We do this every year, and the temporary budget is basically just a quarter of the budget for the year. And we also got the paperwork regarding this And, did anybody have any questions after looking that over? No? Okay, hearing no questions, do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, motion made by Mrs. DeBevick and seconded by Mrs. Angeloff. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, the third, request for legislation is a draft ordinance titled Appropriation Fire Department. This is for an appropriation in the amount of $2,846.43 from the unappropriated item of the general fund to the fire department operating budget. This piece of legislation was referred to us from safety, and Mrs. DeBevick explained that she had received a letter from Chief Pursley. This amount of money is for reimbursement for EMS equipment, right? In relation to COVID,
Yes.
in relation to COVID. Does anybody have any questions regarding this? Hearing none, do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, motion made by Mrs. DeBevick and seconded by Mrs. Angeloff. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously as well. Do we have any topics, miscellaneous topics for discussion? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, motion made by Mrs. DeBevick, seconded by Mr. Medges, and we are adjourned at 7:32 PM. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take, it's the end of our committee meetings. We'll take 2 minutes and then we'll be right back into it with our legislative meeting.
I'm sitting there, I'll tell you. I'm getting old. I'm counting, it's perfect, but it was being wrong.
Just because
Oh,
I don't, my hat says purple. My tattoo is my position.
yeah, I've got a couple cats that are purple, but.
I know.
Tuesday, Sheila on Barberton Road. She's like the sister type of. So, I mean, I take her, she and I designed. Mine all has purple puppy paws for peppers.
We get it for Thanksgiving because there's so much going on.
Never enough. And I always say this should be a Crayola color. Because if you say Barberton purple, everybody knows the shade.
I don't know how to do it, but
Yeah.
after my place this year in October, I was able to get places to match each other. I
Mine,
don't know how to do it.
mine forever was LJ Magic because it's origin magic. And forever is that. And then it finally just got too expensive to have them.
I'm not giving it.
Oh, don't you
I
dare.
don't know how I got it.
Because somebody turned it down that had it. Seriously?
There's no way that could have been.
No, that's
It's sad
amazing.
that some
That's really good. You lucked out.
I wish I would have worn my brown.
Well, I don't know. I guess nobody else got the memo.
I better start coming to the.
I
did.
I
did.
never come to council, And Lord, she's able every Friday. On Fridays, the teams and everything like that.
Oh, I always got that. My jersey had 76 on it.
I know.
Yeah, because we have legislation, we'll vote on that. And then next week,
Okay, let's get going.
Okay.
I'm telling you, good food. Skeleton would catch them all at the same time. You ready to take me away? We're doing it, we're gonna do it. I got an hour and a half, exactly. All over the way. I would like to know. Maybe you guys got Christmas lights up?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. A lot of people have been asking.
Yeah, we have.
Okay,
3 new ones. Yeah.
this is a regular legislative meeting of the Barberton City Council. Today is Monday, December 14th, 2020, at 7:36 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by an invocation by Mrs. DeBette. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear wise and loving Father, first let me say thank you on behalf of all who are gathered here today. Thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself, for the measure of health we need to fulfill our callings, for sustenance and for friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. I pray for our mayor, for all city officials, first responders, and in particular, for this assembled council. I am asking that you would graciously grant us the wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our times, a sense of the welfare and true needs of our people, a keen thirst for justice and rightness, confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to work together in harmony, even when there is honest disagreement, and personal peace in our lives and joy in our tasks. I pray for the agenda set before us today. Please give an assurance of what would please you and what would benefit those who live and work in and around our beloved city of Barberton. It is in your most blessed name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, you had to bear with me tonight. I'm wearing 2 hats. I'm running the meeting and I'm also the clerk today. So, okay, first off is roll call. Mrs. Antonoff,
Here.
Mrs. Coburn, Mrs. DeBevitt,
Here.
Mrs. Fry,
Here.
Mr. Greer,
Present.
Mr. Griffith,
Here.
Mr. Heidick,
Here.
Mr. Jaber.
Here.
Okay, approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting. Mrs. DeBevitt.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion for the approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, November 30th, 2020, as presented.
And Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second that motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. It was moved by Mrs. DeBevitt and seconded by Mr. Heidick to approve the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, November 30th, 2020, as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are adopted. Acceptance of the finance report, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the acceptance of the Finance Department report for the month of November 2020 as presented.
And Mrs. DeBeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on acceptance of the Finance Department report.
Thank you. It was moved by Mrs. Fry and seconded by Mrs. DeBevick to approve the Finance Department's report for the month of November as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Finance report is accepted. Okay, petitions and claims, there aren't any. Matters requested have been passed out. And citizens addressing council, I have one letter. 10 years, its letter is addressed to the mayor and Barberton Council. 10 years ago, the landlord registration ordinance was passed. One reason for this was to be able to track down absentee landlords and require them to fix up their properties, thereby improving the housing stock. In nearly all cases, these fees were offset by increases in the tenant's rent. Now we see the proposal for fees going up to 250% to 500%. Why is this being presented for action at this time during the pandemic, basically behind closed doors? Are you afraid the landlords and tenants will show up and protest if you vote on it? Vote on it when they are not able to be present. Several parts of the ordinance need to be addressed in conjunction with the landlords and tenants. For example, types of violations and the time allowed to correct them, where and how money collected is spent. Again, who is paying for the increase? I have lately been working with the Barberton Community Ministries, delivering food to seniors and other people in need. I have seen firsthand how our people are struggling. It is unconscionable to think of passing such significant increases at this time, when it would be indirectly cause for more hardship to these individuals. I encourage you to rethink the issue and seek other alternatives for increasing the city's coffer at this time. Respectfully submitted, Chuck Flower. Okay, first reading of ordinances and resolutions. Ordinance number 154, 2020, presented by Mrs. Covert, titled Electricity Aggregation Program, an ordinance authorizing all actions necessary to support the continuation of the governmental electric aggregation program with the opt-out provisions pursuant to section 4928.20, Ohio Revised Code, directing the mayor of the city of Barberton to execute an electric supply agreement with Energy Harbor and declaring an emergency. Motion to suspend, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
And Mrs. DeBeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Fry and seconded by Mrs. DeBevick to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension. That's me. Okay, Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Mr. Jager.
Yes.
Mr. Greer.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn. Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick.
Yes.
And Mr. Hyde.
Yes.
Okay. Motion to adopt, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 154-2020.
And Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Fry and seconded by Mrs. DeBevick to adopt ordinance number 154, 2020. Are there any remarks? Okay, call the roll on adoption. Let's see, Mr. Heidick,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn, Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
and Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance number 155, 2020, presented by Mrs. Coburn, title, enter into contract with Green and Hager Environmental Laboratory, Inc. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with Raymond Hager Environmental Laboratories, Inc. for analytical services in 2021 and 2022 and declaring an emergency. Motion to suspend, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
And Mrs. DeBeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Fry and seconded by Mrs. DeBevick to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Okay, call the roll on suspension. Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Angeloff,
Yes.
Mr. Heidick,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn, and Mrs. DeBevick.
Yes.
Okay, motion to adopt. Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 155-2020.
And Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on adoption.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Fry and seconded by Mrs. DeBevick to adopt ordinance number 155-2020. Are there any remarks? Okay, call the roll on adoption. Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
Mr. Coburn, Mrs. Coburn, Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mr. Heidick,
Yes.
Mrs. Angeloff,
Yes.
and Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Okay. Resolution number 156, 2020, presented by all of council, sponsored by Mr. Jaber. Title, Commendation, King's Flowers. A resolution of the council of the city of Barberton to honor and give public recognition to the Pfeiffer family as they celebrate the 100 years of operating King's Flower and a very popular business. Whereas Camellia, Robert, and Alice Kane founded King's Flowers in 1921 and have been an FTD member for over 90 years. And whereas King's Flower was voted best local florist in the Barberton Herald every year since 2008. Whereas council would like to thank and congratulate the Pfeiffer family for serving the community for over 100 years. Now therefore, be it resolved by the council of the city of Barberton and the state of Ohio that the council of the city of Barberton hereby honors and gives public recognition to the Pfeiffer family as they celebrate 100 years of operating Kane's Flowers in a very popular and award-winning Barberton business. That it is hereby found and determined that all formal actions of this council concerning and relating to the passage of this ordinance were given in an open meeting of this council, and all the deliberations of this council and any of its committees that result in such formal actions were meetings open to the public in compliance with the law. That this resolution shall be in full force and effect from after the earliest period allowed by law. Motion to suspend, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
And Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I second the motion of suspension.
Thank you. The motion was made by Mr. Jaber and second by Mr. Griffin to suspend the rule as required by section 5.0 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension. Okay. Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
Mrs. Angeloff,
Yes.
Mr. Heidi,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
and Mrs. Coburn. Okay, motion to adopt, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of resolution number 156-2020.
Thank you, and Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mr. Jaber and second by Mr. Griffin to adopt resolution number 156, 2020. Are there any remarks? Okay, I'll call the roll on adoption. It would be Mrs. Coburn, Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. DeVette,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mr. Heidi,
Yes.
Mrs. Angeloff,
Yes.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
and Mr. Greer.
Yes.
Resolution number 157, 2020, presented by all of council, sponsored by Mr. Jaber. Title Commendation. Jacobs Clemens, a resolution of the council of the city of Barberton to honor and give public recognition to Jacob Clemens in becoming a professional WWE referee. Whereas Jacob Clemens, a 2010 graduate of Barberton, is a referee who has officiated matches on Monday Night Raw, as well as promotions for Evolve and AIW. And whereas Jacobs is a 2010 graduate of Barberton, and his fiancee is Katie Wallace. And whereas Jacobs became a WWN live referee on August 8, 2017, and whereas Jacobs was signed by WWE, the World Wrestling Entertainment Inc., and whereas council would like to congratulate Jacobs Clemens in becoming a professional WWE referee. Now therefore, let it be resolved by the council of the city of Barberton and the state of Ohio, that the council of the city of Barberton hereby honors and gives public recognition to Jacob Clemens in becoming a professional WWE referee. That is hereby found and determined that all formal actions of this council concerning and relating to the passage of this ordinance were given in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of any of its committees that result in such formal actions were meetings open to the public in compliance with the law. This resolution shall be in full force and effective from the after the earliest period of the law. Motion to suspend.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you, and Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Jaber's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and second by Mr. Griffin to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Call the roll on suspension. Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn, Mr. Heidi,
Yes.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mrs. Angela,
Yes.
and Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Motion to adopt, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of resolution 157-2020.
Thank you, and Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second the motion on adoption of resolution number 157-2020.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and second by Mr. Griffin to adopt resolution number 157, 2020. Are there any remarks? Call the roll on adoption. Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Angeloff,
Yes.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mr. Heiding,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn, Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
and Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Ordinance number 158, 2020, presented by Mrs. Fry, titled Adopting the Reader Rules and Regulations, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Barberton to adopt the rules and regulations of the Regional Income Tax Agency, RETA, and declaring an emergency. Motion to suspend, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
And Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Fry and second by Mrs. DeBevick to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? The roll, call the roll on suspension. Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn, Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
Mrs. Angeloff,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mr. Heiding,
Yes.
and Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Okay, motion to adopt, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 158-2020.
Thank you, and Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion.
Okay, a motion was made by Mrs. Fry and second by Mrs. DeBevick to adopt ordinance number 158-2020. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption. Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mr. Heiding,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Angeloff,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn, Mr. Greer,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Okay, end of first readings. Second readings of ordinances and resolutions. Okay, the next two ordinances, number 147-2020 and 148-2020, are second readings only. Ordinance number 147-2020, presented by Mrs. Angeloff, titled Amending Barberton Codified Ordinance, Chapter 670, Trees, Weeds, and Grass, Chapter 1422, Registration in General, and Chapter 1444, Permits and Fees, an ordinance amending Section 670.02, removing of weeds by owner and or occupant. 5 days notice. Ordinance number 49/2013, Section 1422.04, registration fees, insurance. Ordinance number 32/2011, and Section 1444.15, general permit fees. Ordinance number 146/2016. Ordinance number 148/2020. Excuse me. Ordinance number 148/2020, presented by Mrs. Angeloff, titled Amending Barberton Codified Ordinance, Chapter 1478, Rental Property Registration Program, an ordinance amending Section 1478.08, registration required. Ordinance number 65/2009. End of second readings and resolutions. Third reading of ordinances and resolution, there are none. Appointments, there are two. Okay, the Board of Zoning Appeals, Richard Waltz, 3 terms, January 1st, 2021 through December 31, 2023. I need a motion from Mrs. Fry.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to appoint Mr. Richard Waltz to the City of Barberton's Board of Zoning Appeals for a 3-year term beginning January 1st, 2021 and ending December 31st, 2023.
Thank you, and Mrs. DeBevick.
I would not like to second that appointment.
Okay, let's see. Mrs. Angeloff?
I will make a motion, I will second that motion to appoint Mr. Richard Waltz to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
A motion was made by Mrs. Fry and second by Mrs. Angeloff to appoint Richard Waltz to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a 3-year term effective January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2023. Are there any remarks? Mrs. DeBevick?
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to start off by personally thanking Mr. Waltz for his service. I've known Mr. Waltz for more than half of my life, and I have the deepest gratitude and respect for his dedication to the city of Barberton. With that being said, I will be voting no for this appointment tonight. During a time where technology has played a crucial role in the everyday dealings of government as a direct result of COVID, there was mention of some confusion regarding what Mr. Waltz was applying for because he didn't have email. I think moving forward, we don't know what COVID's gonna bring, and I did ask the mayor if there were other applicants, and so for that reason, I will be voting no for this appointment this evening.
Okay, are there any other remarks? Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be voting no, and I concur with Councilor DeBevick.
Okay, and Mr. Gregg?
Thank you, Mr. President. I too will be voting no. I just wanted to mention that the nominee was mailed an application which was filled out wrong for the wrong position due to confusion. The lack of ability to fix applications simply by printing off a new application or resubmitting in another email is concerning to me. With the meetings being held virtually, how is this applicant supposed to be able to attend meetings? What about handling of documents prior to the meetings? What about last minute changes? And with that, I'll be voting no.
Okay, anyone else? Mr. Baker?
I'll also be following Mrs. DeBevick's decision in voting no. Same reason, DeBevick asked last week, asked the mayor, and he said he has a phone. Well, these days, emails are faster than phones, and text messages, and also Zoom. And everything just can't be handled by a flip phone anymore. It's time to upgrade. So I'll also be voting no.
Okay, anyone else? Mr. Griffin?
Yes, Mr. President. I was on the Board of Zoning Appeals, and I was on there with Mr. Waltz. And he's a very knowledgeable person, and he knows everything about the zoning. And I think that I know that he can really do the job. And I'll go along with, I will vote yes, because I know he can do the job, whether he's not technically savvy, so to speak, but he gets the job done. And like I said, I'll be voting yes, maybe because, you know, of his age and everything, but still, like I said, I know him personally, and I worked with him on zoning appeals, and he's a great guy to work with, and he knows about Barberton, and he knows about the zoning, so.
Okay, any other remarks? Okay, since this is going to be a close vote, I need you to say your answer and raise your hand so I can keep track of it easier. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, he is not appointed. Okay, there's another appointment. It's a Barberton Community Foundation Board of Directors. It's for Trevor Hunt, a 3-year term, January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2023. I need a motion for Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the appointment of Mr. Trevor Hunt to a 3-year term to the Barberton Community Foundation Board of Directors. The term would be January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2023.
Thank you, and Mrs. DeBevick.
I would not like to second that item.
Okay, so Mrs. Angeloff,
I will second that motion to appoint Mr. Hunt.
okay. Okay, motion was made by Mrs. Fry and second by Mrs. Angeloff to appoint Trevor Hunt to the Barberton Community Foundation Board of Directors for a 3-year term effective January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2023. Are there any remarks? Mrs. DeBeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. While I'm fully aware that the Barberton Community Foundation Board of Directors has an appointment position available that can include a non-resident if the applicant works or owns a business in the city, I strongly believe that there are qualified residents to hold these seats, and for that reason, I will be voting no.
Okay, any other remarks? Mr. Heidi.
Thank you, Mr. President. While I do understand Councilor DeBevick's notion there, I do believe Mr. Hunt has shown that he is willing to essentially tear apart our development code that is quite antiquated, and I believe that his service on the foundation's board will be an asset. So I will vote yes.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be voting no tonight. Mr. Hunt's a great guy, great for the city. I'm happy he's on board with us. I believe he's gonna be a resident, at least of 44203 area code. Is it the 44203? For now, he's only been here since May, and we're opening doors to him easily. He hasn't proven himself yet to me yet. For us to move on and give him that seat right there is a very, very important seat. I believe if we have somebody who is a resident or a business owner in the 44203 that's proven himself to being a businessman or businesswoman in Barberton or Norton, I would vote for that person. But since he is new, again, he's a great guy. He still has not proven himself to me yet. So for that reason, I'm voting no.
Okay. Anyone else? Mrs. Fry.
I believe that the Barberton Community Foundation is who nominated him for this position.
Correct.
And actually going forward with the city and doing planning and the many projects that we want to be involved in, I believe that his seat on the foundation board would be something that would be good for the city. And everybody always says all these people, you know, that we have more qualified people or we have people that want to serve. However, in most cases, nobody comes forward. These are volunteer positions. And I think that Mr. Hunt has the qualifications because the board normally tries to get somebody from different job classifications that would, you know, benefit the foundation, like finance or somebody that's in banking or somebody that is a builder or a planner or what have you to move the city forward. So therefore, I will be voting for Mr. Hunt. And as I said, I think it would benefit the city to have him on the board.
Thank you. And Mrs. Angeloff.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've had the honor and the privilege to work with Mr. Hunt since he's been on as planning director. He is going to, his job is to take that development code and tear it apart piece by piece and see how that can be rewritten and how that can help the citizens in Barberton. And I think it's sometimes a very good thing when you have somebody that doesn't live in this town, that doesn't know anybody in this town, that comes into this town and has a different vision or asks questions, why you do it this way, why don't you do it that way? And I think that's what the foundation was looking for. They do have positions that are for non-resident residents, non-Barberton residents, and I think that's a plus because that knowledge that they have from other communities or where they worked before, or what, I think that's an asset to the city and to the foundation. And I will be voting yes, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Uh,
Mr. Griffin?
Yes, Mr. President, I don't think a resident requirement would be good for this position. I mean, if you look at police and fire, correct me if I'm wrong, and they're always talking about, the overtime and blah, blah, and this and that. And the majority of them live outside of the city of Barberton. And so I don't think, that should be an issue with this position, especially that the foundation appointed him. He was appointed by them. So that's why I'm voting yes for it,
Anyone else? Okay, there again, I'm gonna have you raise your hands and sit and use a verbal. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, it's 5-2, he's appointed. Okay, miscellaneous and unfinished business, there isn't any. Anything from the good of the body? Mrs. April.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Tomorrow, December 15th at 5:30, the Board of Building and Zoning Appeals will be meeting right here at the Active Adult Center. And Wednesday at 5:30, the Planning Commission meeting will be here at the Active Adult Center.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Gregg.
Go Browns.
Communications from the mayor. Everybody gonna speak for him?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Thank you. Mr. Heidi.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adjourn.
Thank you. It was moved by Mrs. DeBevick and seconded by Mr. Heidi that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned at 8:12. Okay, we're gonna go right into this next meeting. Let me get organized here.
You did a good job.